Rob Maaddi, you get the old massage that keeps you a little late. You're running behind because you're getting a massage for the interview with Mike Gill, right? That's what happens. That's why you run late.
Yeah, you know what? I could use one right about now. I wish I could get a massage. My back hurts, my this hurts, my that hurts. It's all going well though. Good for it though. That's what you got to do as an NFL player,
Right.
as any kind of professional athlete. Got to keep the body right. You got to be limber. You got to feel good. You got to go out there and get the job done.
Yep, and he was very interesting. So I asked him, what offensive player stands out daily, not just one day here or one day, every day? Which offensive player stands out to him? What's his answer?
Was it Quez Watkins?
Quez Watkins is the guy. Is this Hank Baskett, Gibbs, Paul Turner? Who else has been in the line of Mr. Lehigh or whatever? Is this that, or is he, or is this the real deal, man?
There's been a ton of guys right over the years who have been Mr. Training Camp, and then you get into the regular season. Paul Turner's case, you couldn't even get him on the field. He was never active, and he finally got an opportunity and didn't do anything. Hank Baskett was good for a few 75-plus yard touchdown catches. I don't know, Mike. I think Quez Watkins might be something here. Like I think there's a possibility that what they saw in Quez Watkins to draft him where they did last year, and although he's a late round, he's a day 3 pick, you don't expect a day 3 pick to develop. You do look at guys who've been day 3 picks in the past and say, hey, Antonio Brown was a day 3 pick, right? I'm not saying that Quez Watkins is going to be Antonio Brown, but it's happened. There's been possibilities. And Nick Sirianni's a guy who knows wide receivers very well. And maybe the problem, Mike, in the past with whether it was Quez Watkins, John Hightower, Jalen Reagor, or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was the coaching staff. Maybe the coaching staff couldn't develop these wide receivers, and maybe they do have that talent that got them to where they are and drafted by a professional football team, and maybe they needed a coaching staff to be able to maximize their potential, get the most out of them. And Nick Sirianni and his guys, now, of course, Aaron Moorhead's back, and he's a wide receivers coach, and he was here last year. So then you look at it and go, well, what did he do different if that's the case, right? And the difference is that Doug Peterson and the other guys who are around.
Right. Well, that's a big topic of conversation, Rob, is did Doug Peterson won with his veteran players, but after the veterans started to get older, we never saw. So it's been this battle. Does Howie draft poorly, or did Doug not develop? We'll find out this year, maybe.
And I think you need a few years to find out, because you look at the drafts over the past couple of years. Look at Andre Dillard. That was a product of an inability to develop. I don't know. Jeff Stoutland's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. So we'll see. We'll find out this year if he gets that opportunity, and that's going to be something that we have to closely watch. I'm very interested to see how that pans out over the next 2 weeks as we lead into the first week of the season. As you look back at the past draft mistakes and the draft failures, you got to point back to the GM on that. I can't think that Doug Peterson suddenly couldn't coach guys up, but there might be something too. He was able to get veteran players who already had developed, who already had success in the league, to play to their potential. Now, let's not forget, Carson Wentz was a second-year guy and played like an MVP in his second season with Doug Peterson and Frank Reich. So they were able to develop him at least a little bit, but then Frank Reich left, and Carson kind of started going downhill. Is that on Doug? It's a really good question, Mike,
yeah.
And I think it's one that we'll find out over the next 2 years.
When Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press covers the NFL, when we mentioned Quez Watkins, Fletcher Cox brought him up, now Anthony Harris, you're intrigued. I feel like you had this guy, and I feel like this is with a lot of guys, that Peterson did not accentuate their positives. Like, can I get this guy with all this 4.3 speed, the ball in unique ways? I feel like they didn't utilize those guys in the proper way. So I never got to see, like Watkins, I think, had one big play last year where you're like, whoa, where's that? We saw it in the first time he was on the field against Pittsburgh the other night. He got shot out of a damn cannon and ran for 75 yards.
We don't even have to look further than Carson Wentz. Doug Peterson And that system that he ran didn't put him in a position to maximize his strengths. So when you can't do that with your quarterback, that's a problem. And then obviously that trickles down to, can they do that? I don't think they were able to maximize. Miles Sanders, to me, should be more productive than he is. And you're right. When you look at Quez Watkins, when you look at Jalen Reagor last year and the ways they didn't get him the ball, how about finding a way to get the ball in his hands early in a game? Doesn't have to be downfield. Doesn't even have to be a 10-yard slant or a 15-yard curl route or whatever it may be. Why don't you get him the ball some way? He's got the speed. Find a way to get the ball in his hands. And I think they got to look at the way Kyle Shanahan runs his offense. Now, the San Francisco 49ers, they didn't do anything last year. They were devastated by injuries. But 2 years ago, went to the Super Bowl, and they have a tremendous running offense, but they run out of so many various formations, so many different ways. The wide receivers get handoffs, and they come around and get the ball in jet screens and bubble screens and all this kind of stuff. I need to see that now from the Eagles because we didn't see that last year. And you're right, that does fall on the coaching staff and their inability to find ways to maximize the talent of the guys that they did have.
That's a great point with the 49ers because every time I watch them in that Super Bowl season, all you always say, Rob, is, my God, look at the speed on this team. They have speed all over. And it seems like Sirianni is kind of going down that road where he's trying to get the fastest guys he can find on the field. Does that mean, because he said the other day, the guys you see who's running with the first team, if you're seeing them out there, what does that tell you? Well, Watkins is out there. So he's putting his speed guys out in the field, which tells me he feels like he can find creative ways to get these guys the ball. That should be we were asking the listeners earlier, what's something you are, whether this team has a winning record or a losing record, what's something you're excited to find out about? I want to find out how he utilizes all this speed.
Yeah, and I agree. I want to see how his creativity on offense and what he can do to enable guys, whether or not they got that maximum talent to play in the NFL or they're just there, they're on the cusp, they're a day 3 pick, they're a guy who's on the edge, but they're still talented enough to be in the NFL, and there's still ways that you can get these guys to be productive. So I'm excited, like you're saying, about Nick and his offense and his system. And all I've heard about him since the day the Eagles hired him from other coaches, from other players who played for him is he's creative. He's a great teacher. He communicates well. He's able to get guys to understand what he wants them to do. And I think that's a huge character. That's a trait that is very important in the NFL. Because there are teachers, there are coaches who can't communicate well enough. Why are we running this play? Why are we running this formation? Why are we doing it this way? Why are we practicing that way? And guys are out there going through the motions. But if they're able to buy into what he's selling,
right,
if they can understand fully why we're doing this, why we're going whatever route it is, whatever play it is, whatever formation it is, and they're on board fully, I think that allows them to execute and you'll see more production out of these guys, even if they don't have the talent of teams like Tampa and Kansas City and Green Bay and others.
Well, I know that on the offensive side of the ball, it's a young core group of skill players, but they have that veteran offensive line. Can you tie those together to have a successful offense? I think that will be very interesting. On the defensive side, Rob, you have a similar situation with that older core group of defensive linemen. But what about behind them? Like, I still feel like we haven't figured out what that secondary is going to look like. I know you have Slay and Nelson and Harris and McLeod, but are they going to be used differently than Jim Schwartz did?
And I think from what we know about Jonathan Gannon is that he is going to do things differently than Jim Schwartz. And that's another area defensively where I'm excited to see, because maybe part of the problems that the Eagles have had over the past several years is Jim Schwartz's defensive scheme. It's his system. And maybe the way that Jonathan Gannon can get guys to play in the secondary will allow them to have more success. I think Darius Slay and Steven Nelson are pretty strong a nice duo back there at the cornerback. And of course, you need a nickel back. Sometimes you need four guys. Sometimes there's 5 wide receiver sets. There's all that out there. But to start off with Slay, who he had some trouble last year with DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, some of the elite guys, and I need him to be better against if you want to be an elite corner, you got to occasionally shut down the talented, the elite wide receivers. But the way Jonathan Gannon's system has been in the past is different, and I wouldn't anticipate him coming in here and doing things against the way he has gone in the past. Now, sometimes he talked early in the OTAs areas and about, hey, I don't have one scheme, I don't have one system. I cater my defense to the strengths of my players. Nick Sirianni's preached that too as well. I think that's a positive thing because we saw a lot of times where Doug Peterson and his staff and Jim Schwartz, they didn't cater to the strengths of their players. They had it their way, and they wanted guys to fit into their style and their offense and their defense and their system.
So Friday night, we don't anticipate seeing the starters. We can all agree there, Rob. So what do we take, if anything, from tomorrow night?
Yeah, I'm still – you look at the guys who are fighting for roster spots. You look at the guys, the young, hungry, talent. Some of these players, this is it. This is the only opportunity they're ever going to get to play professional football, and they're going to have to move on with the rest of their life. So I'm excited to see what some of these guys can do because, after all, it's football. And, hey, can Nick Mullins just throw the ball to Eagles players? Like, I know it's 2 shades of green tomorrow night, right? Eagles and the Jets, and it's difficult. But, hey, can Nick Mullins at least keep – and Joe Flacco will get an opportunity to play. I really don't care what he does out there. I'm not going to judge Joe Flacco in preseason games. He's a former Super Bowl MVP. So he's done enough. His resume is strong enough that I'm confident in his ability to be a backup quarterback for the Eagles. But you look at the other positions, and it's going to – I don't know how you're going to determine that wide receiver, the battle at wide receiver for 5 and 6 and how many you're going to take. And running back looks like it's going to be set. And now you just look at the offensive line, defensive line, secondary. Special teams guys tomorrow get an opportunity to shine, and you see what they can do. So I keep saying this throughout the preseason. Preseason football is better than no football. So regardless, I'll be tuned in.
All right, so that last running back, or let me ask you this. After Sanders, which of the running backs has the biggest impact in your mind?
Well, Kenny Gainwell is somebody that we can really look at it and say he's got potential. And Boston Scott, for me, is somebody – we've seen him come in and have some success, especially when he plays against the New York Giants. But the number 2 guy, I think Kenny Gainwell will surpass him. When you talk about his hands, right, he's got good hands catching the ball. He's got burst. He's got speed. He had success last year in college, and I think he's going to be elevated into that second running back spot to where – I don't know that Nick Sirianni will ever be a guy, and just looking at the way his other coaches around the league that he's worked with have done it, they're not going to ride anybody 25, 30 times. So Miles Sanders is going to be interchangeable at times. Now, of course, I would rather Miles Sanders get the bulk of the carries, the bulk of the touches, and the workload, and maybe he can be at around 15 to 20 touches per game. But I think the guy you'll see up next is going to be Kenny Gainwell. And if he can continue to show the flashes of what he's shown throughout a little bit of camp and what we've been able to see of him so far, I think this kid's really got potential. And inevitably, at some point, Boston Scott's going to be getting the ball. He's going to be getting some touches, and he can do some things. So it's going to be really incumbent upon the offensive line and how healthy are they up front, their cohesion, their chemistry, and their ability to dominate the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that's I said this many times leading into this year, Rob, but their offensive line's health is maybe a key to which way this season could go. If it's like last year, you might be 4 or 5 wins. If that offensive line's healthy, who knows where they can end up at. So we'll see at the offensive line because they got some depth there, right? We talked about the possibility of trading Dillard, but I wouldn't be surprised if their phone rings for a couple of their other guys.
Yeah, you look at the depth they have. Jack Driscoll had some opportunities to play last year. He's a guy that they were high on. Landon Dickerson, they drafted him. When he gets himself right, when he gets himself healthy, he certainly has some potential. So the fact that they're deep at that position
right.
is such a strength for this team, because we know and we've seen how guys go down. And when you have Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey on the opposite side of 30, and two of those guys coming off injuries, I don't anticipate. I think the last time, Mike, the Eagles started the same five guys on the offensive line for a full 16-game season. It's remarkable to me that they even did that any team can do that. Was the 2013 year, was Chip Kelly's first year, and those guys up front dominated, helped them win the NFC East. Did they win the NFC East or just make the playoffs?
Well, it's funny because it's funny you say that, because this feels so much like that 2012 team had all the injuries. They were decimated by injuries on the offensive line. Andy gets fired. Well, I guess asked to leave or however that went down, but no one gets fired anymore. Chip comes in and gets the offensive line back. They win 10 games. They went from a 3-win team or a 4-win team to a 10-win team. This team feels similar to me anyway. I don't know about the people out there, but offensive line issues. Now offensive line's healthy. New coach comes in, and voila, everything seems to be peachy keen almost.
Well, the difference is Nick Sirianni didn't invent the game of football like Chip Kelly did. So in 2013, when Chip Kelly took over and reinvented the NFL, nobody was prepared for that. Nobody. Yeah, those were some fun times. Those were some interesting times that year. That was Nick Foles' 27-29-2 season, man. How about that?
27-2.
Well, I count the playoffs, man. 2 touchdowns against the Saints, no picks. That counts.
You're good.
He walked off the field with a lead. Defense gave it. Special teams and defense gave it up, or Nicky would have beat the Drew Brees in that postseason game, in that playoff game. But I don't anticipate, man, Mike. I don't think Nick Sirianni is going to get this team to make that leap from the 4-11-1 direct that they were last year to a playoff team that's 10-6. Oh, well, now it's a 17-game season, 10-7 or 11-6. I'm still sticking with the 6-8 wins.
All right, it all goes down tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. And then on September 12th, it's Eagles-Falcons. Falcons are a 3.5-point favorite in that game against the Eagles. Rob Maaddi's with us Tuesdays and Thursdays. And check out Faith on the Field Saturdays and Sundays here. Now, I was asking you on Tuesday. We got cut off. What do you got coming up this weekend on Faith on the Field?
Former Pittsburgh Steeler Pro Football Hall of Famer Alan Faneca is on the show.
Hey.
Very interesting conversation with Alan Faneca, who, man, when you look at old pictures of him, grizzled beard, tough, burly guy, I did a little Zoom interview with him, and I was like, dude, you look like a kicker. He lost like 150 pounds, shaved his face, like clean shaven, clean cut, all this stuff, skinny, thin. I was like, man, he's like, don't call me a kicker, Rob. Don't call me a kicker. Like, you know what? I'm sorry. You look like a quarterback.
I
but
said
Alan
that
Faneca is on the show.
when he gave his speech at the Hall of Fame, whenever that was, a couple weeks ago, I said, my God, what happened to this guy? And by the way, Stefan Wisniewski retired today. I think he's been a former guest of Faith on the Field.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Steph Wisniewski's a great dude. You have a minute for a quick story?
Go for it.
Minute? So 4 days before the 2017 preseason season opener, I hosted a Faith on the Field event at Eastern University. Carson Wentz and Trey Burton, I knew they were coming. We had talked about it, talked about the things that we were going to do. And they said, somebody else, another player may come with us. Wasn't prepared for it. Steph Wisniewski shows up. So Steph's sitting there, and the knowledge that he brought, like the biblical knowledge, the depth, the maturity. I was like, this guy, at some point in his life, he's going to go into ministry, and here he is today, retiring and announcing that he's going to become a pastor. So good for Steph Wisniewski, a tremendous addition to the Eagles team back then when they won the Super Bowl. And then went on and won another one with Kansas City.
Kansas City, yep, and he played last year in that game that they lost. Yeah. Faith on the Field Saturday is at 8:00. Sunday at 6:30. Rob is your host. Alan Faneca is the guest this week. All right, Rob, good to see you, man.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, there he goes. Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press, Tuesdays and Thursdays with us right here on the Sports Bash, and his Faith on the Field airs Saturdays and Sundays.